Call to avert another genocidal war and promote peace in Ethiopia. A public protest for justice in Washington, D.C., November 4, 2025. By Mulugeta Gebregziabher, Ph.D. From 2020 to 2022, Tigray suffered one of the deadliest and most brutal conflicts in recent memory. Independent reports from the New Lions Institute and peer-reviewed studies have documented evidence of genocidal acts, including mass starvation, systemic sexual violence, targeting of health facilities and civilian infrastructure and workers, and widespread civilian massacres. Survivors still carry the physical and emotional scars of that horror, as echoed in The Guardian's June 30, 2025 report on gender-based atrocities. Smaller scale but devastating conflict has been going on in Western Oromia region of Ethiopia during the same period. In the last 2 years, there is an ongoing devastating war in the Amhara and Western Oromia regions of Ethiopia. The atrocities in these wars has gotten limited coverage, but recent reports by the U.S. State Department, Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch indicate that the casualties and destruction of civilian infrastructure needs international attention. According to the World Report 2025 by Human Rights Watch, fighting between the Ethiopian military and militias in the Amhara region resulted in hundreds of civilian deaths and injuries, including attacks against refugees and civilian infrastructure such as hospitals. The government renewed a sweeping state of emergency for the Amhara region, but its provisions were applied throughout Ethiopia. Mass arrests persisted once it expired. And now, the storm clouds gather once more. Despite the Pretoria Peace Agreement, and call for peace from the Tigray, Amhara and Oromia political forces, the Abiy Ahmed regime appears intent on returning to war, which now seems to include Eritrea too. In his parliamentary address on October 28, 2025, the Prime Minister of Ethiopia has made it clear that war is inevitable. Multiple signals indicate that the fragile peace is unraveling. Warmongering in parliamentary speech, Prime Minister Abiy's recent appeals to diplomats, religious leaders, and elders to caution Tigray against entering into conflict, despite Tigray's repeated call for the full implementation of the Pretoria Peace Agreement, delivered during his address to the Ethiopian Parliament, is seen as highly alarming. It echoes the rhetoric he used in his speech to Parliament just before the 2020 war, where he made similar statements days before declaring war. This is widely regarded as evidence of an impending war. Precision drone threats over Tigray, following a private statement, reported by reliable media outlets, by Prime Minister Abiy referencing tactics like Israel used on Iran. Surveillance drones have reappeared in Mekelle, threatening the lives of Tigray's civilian leadership and undermining any confidence in peaceful resolution. This has been admitted by the Prime Minister of Ethiopia in his parliamentary address on October 28, 2025. Dangerous brinkmanship with Eritrea, the government's inflammatory threats toward Eritrea, and Asmara's military posturing in response, risk plunging the region into a broader conflagration with devastating consequences for the Horn of Africa. Repeated references to the imminence of war with Eritrea, including the statement, "War can break out at any time," was said by the Prime Minister of Ethiopia in his parliamentary address on October 28, 2025. Ethnic profiling and arbitrary detentions, echoing the early days of the 2020 genocide, young Tigrayans are being rounded up in Addis Ababa, held in mass encampments without cause or due process. This is not law enforcement, it is ethnic persecution. Failure to provide justice and accountability for industrial-scale looting and atrocities. There is a growing appetite to use Tigray resources to fund the war on Tigray. In the 2020 to 2022 war, the invading forces looted Tigray and destroyed everything they couldn't take with them. This is documented in a new investigative report by the Sentry, which accuses Eritrean leaders of orchestrating industrial-scale looting and atrocities during and after the war in Ethiopia's Tigray region. The Eritrean Defense Forces, EDF, allegedly trafficked gold, antiquities, and human beings while committing brutal acts such as gang rape, torture, and mutilation. The report estimates that $75 to $80 million in gold is diverted annually to the black market from EDF-controlled areas. Similar accusations have been made against the Ethiopian forces. Both Ethiopia and Eritrea have increased their rhetoric about war and their prowess. Ethiopia warns that Eritrea is rebuilding its military and continuing to destabilize neighboring countries, raising fears of renewed conflict. Eritrea is leveling the same counter-accusations. This back and forth is now at the level of the top government leaders. This is causing unease and tension with the people of Tigray and the region. The Sentry urges international actors, including the UN Security Council, to impose targeted sanctions and take swift action to prevent further escalation. We do too. We implore the United States and members of the United Nations Security Council, UNSC, to lead the world in urgently calling for peace in Ethiopia and protecting the innocent people from being unjustly annihilated. The Tigray people, after the recent genocidal war, need protection, justice, and peace. The people in the Amhara and Western Oromia regions need peace and right to live without fear and drone attacks. The millions of people in these war-prone regions need a global power willing to stand between them and annihilation. We would like to join hands in making a call upon the US and the UN Security Council to demand immediate compliance with the Pretoria Cessation of Hostilities Agreement, COHA, with international monitors on the ground and access for humanitarian agencies restored without obstruction. This might require the US to reassume the leadership role that its envoy to the Horn of Africa, Ambassador Hammer, and his predecessors played in making the COHA possible. Condemn the use of drones for political intimidation or assassination and make clear that further escalation will trigger diplomatic and economic consequences. Sanction individuals/entities leading the perpetuation of war crimes against international law. Lead a multilateral peace initiative with the UN and EU, not after conflict reignites, but now, before the first shot is fired. The current descent to war could be prevented if the US reassumes its leadership in coordinating the COHA implementation and monitoring, since the African Union has forgotten its role as stipulated in the agreement. Silence, in the face of a second genocide, will not be remembered as neutrality. It will be remembered as complicity. Let history show that when the people of Ethiopia cried out for protection, America and the international community stood with them. 2 years later, in 2020, civilians in Ethiopia found themselves in an armed conflict that was referred to as one of the worst atrocities of the 21st century: mass killings, mass displacements, sexual violence, and unmatched polarization. The war that began in Tigray exposed not only the dangerous reality in Ethiopia, it also provoked all of us to ask far-reaching questions about humanity's future.